Howdy folks, welcome back to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. Might be a slightly shorter than average episode of Mingles with Jingles. I'm back from MCM London Comic Con 2014 and I am absolutely exhausted. I got back, I edited the video for it, uploaded it, and I think I must have slept for 13 hours after that, but it was a fantastic experience. Comic Con wasn't as big an event as Gamescom, but what made it different for me was just the sheer volume and quality of the cosplayers that were in attendance. I mean, there were a lot of cosplayers at Gamescom, there were a lot of cosplayers at EGX, but at times you're wandering around the exhibition halls at Comic Con and it felt like that there were more people in costume than not. It was almost the case that if you turned up and you weren't in some kind of costume, you were the one who stood out from the crowd. And I did meet a lot of you guys at Comic Con as well. One fellow in particular stood out, however.
Okay, here I am at MCM Comic Con with the mighty Jingles himself. Knowing he was coming here, I decided that I'd go and find people who looked a little bit like Jingles and tell them, if asked, to admit to the world that they were Jingles. Right now, there is a random French dude somewhere near the Costa who I told to tell everyone he was Jingles if asked. And whilst in a queue to get a tasty Costa coffee, by the way, it's fucking expensive in here, it's crippling the fucking Southerners and their coffee prices. Two kids were on about maybe they'll get to meet Jingles. I said, he's over there. Off they trotted, and then out last I saw them having an argument with a Jingles who they think's being an arrogant bastard because he's only speaking French. Oh yeah! No, well done mate, you're a fucking hero. Seriously man.
What a bastard. But you've got to admire his style. So, you know, when I wasn't bumping into subscribers who were busy trolling other subscribers, I was having the time of my life, and I was very, very, very excited to see a bunch of cosplayers in particular. As you know, I'm a huge Star Wars, Aliens and Predator fan, and I finally got to see some of the 501st Stormtrooper Legion. So that's one item ticked off my bucket list, and then just a couple of minutes later outside in the main hall, I bumped into these two, and I was fangirling so hard, I forgot to be scared of the alien. Well, literally 2 minutes after meeting these two, I bumped into a bunch of the US Colonial Marines' finest, and after I'd taken a quick video of these two fellas, I just had to introduce them all to each other. And then I pretty much just stood there with a camera rolling and a big fat grin on my face. It was amazing. The only thing that could have made this any better was if I could have found a bunch of Predators as well. I am fangirling so hard right now! Alright, oh, wouldn't it be great if an X-Wing pilot would have suddenly walked along? Comic Con, where dreams come true. Who's next? Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd and Officer Alex Murphy. More Judge Dredds. East Meg judges. How about Lord of the Rings? Yep, we've got Lord of the Rings. We've got the Hobbits, we've got the Dwarves, we've got the Elves, we've got the bad guys. I was as happy as a pig in shit, just wandering around with the camera rolling in this place. And you know, the thing about cosplay is people really don't care what you look like. They don't care if you're black, you're white, you're fat, you're bald, you're old, you're ugly. It's all about your costume. One costume in particular absolutely took my breath away, just for the sheer amount of work that had gone into it.
Turn around real quick, and then we'll do right. Good? Alright. High five. So now you have to do me a favor, you got to put it back on.
The day was not without its disappointments, however. I spotted the Star Wars X-Wing fighter that I got for Christmas in 1977. £55, bargain, but I didn't have a bag on me, I'd left it at the hotel. So when I came back the next day with a bag in order to buy it, it had been sold. And that made me sad. I'll tell you one thing, however, that was absolutely huge at Comic Con this year, and has really, really taken off in a big way, and that's the anime, Attack on Titan. It was... The number of people in Attack on Titan costumes was just mind-boggling. You quite literally could not stand anywhere at Comic Con, except maybe in a toilet cubicle, without seeing somebody in some kind of Attack on Titan costume. And that's one of the other things about cosplaying at an event like this, and it's the instant sense of friendship and community that you get when you see somebody else who's wearing, if not the same costume as you, then a costume based on the same theme as the one that you're wearing, and you would see huge groups of Attack on Titan cosplayers all mixing together, and huge groups of Jedi all mixing together, and of course, well, when you put the red team and the blue team together in Team Fortress 2, there's only one thing that's going to happen.
Charge!
Medic! And imagine how cool it would have been when you were a kid if you had parents like these. There were some stars at the show as well. There's Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, all grown up. This was as close as I could get to him without entering a draw in order to win the chance of getting an autograph. Other stars present who weren't quite so shy with the original cast of the Power Rangers. Hattie Hayridge and Robert Llewellyn, the stars of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf. Look at Hattie down there in the corner. There she is. Hello, Hattie. She was great. And that fine ass, you're welcome ladies, belongs to star of stage and screen, also Red Dwarf, Blade 2, and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, Danny John Jules. This, however, was the biggest queue in the building. At one point it was 3 hours long, and at the other end of the queue was a young lady which a lot of people in particular had come an awful long way to meet. It is, of course, the American cosplayer Jessica Negri, who stood at the end of this queue for 3 days in a row, all day, and never stopped being anything less than incredibly friendly and approachable.
Hey! She's my mic. You can come here now. You're from Denmark. She's from Norway. Okay. Yeah.
I saw the video, but I said sorry. They went to
In May. Yeah.
and I was like, all right. October.
October. Yeah, we did it. We made it.
Wait, get back in. Cool.
Yay!
She even came over and shared all her candy with all the film crews. She really was great, and it was nice to meet her. So, that's what I got up to this week. How about you? You know, I wasn't going to go to Comic-Con. People who watched my Gamescom videos and my EGX videos had said, oh, Jingles, Comic-Con's coming up in the end of October, you've got to go to Comic-Con as well. And I was kind of resisting the idea, because often when you look at the guest list, you know, which stars are turning up to these kind of conventions, it's usually, you know, the most famous person you can see on the guest list is some guy who played a Star Trek red shirt in the 3rd season of Voyager. You know, there's very rarely, you know, major stars turning up to these kind of events, certainly not in the UK anyway. And yet, if I hadn't, it would have been such a mistake, because the stars that are turning up are secondary, at least as far as I'm concerned. What made Comic-Con for me was you guys, the members of the public, the cosplayers who turned up, all the geeks and nerds with the shared passion for science fiction, fantasy, horror, pop culture, you name it. That is what makes this kind of event special. Not, you know, the movie stars and the comic book authors and you know, the stars who are showing up. It's almost secondary. It was the members of the public that made this thing absolutely amazing. I cannot recommend going to one of these events enough. It really was like going out for the weekend for a laugh with 50,000 of your best friends. So, anyway, moving on, and I'm going to try to continue the tradition that I started in last week's Mingles with Jingles, where, you know, I actually answer some of your questions for a change, and we're going to kick right off with a question from Imperial Ace. He wants to know, Jingles, what's your favourite moment out of any science fiction game, movie, book, etc.? Can be absolutely anything. Anything that made you squeal with joy, get so mad you felt like your eyes were going to pop out of your head, scare you till you walked away during a waddle from trying to keep the shit from falling out of your pants. Favourite moment of all time. Multiples are acceptable if you're like me and you can't have just one favourite. I am like you. I cannot have just one favourite. There are too many amazing moments to be able to just pick one. Now, while I don't expect everybody to share the same opinions as I do, although I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you did, because, you know, we do all seem to share the same passions for the same kind of geeky subjects, but, you know, those of you who don't agree with my choices, then by all means, go ahead and list your favourites in the comments. For me, however, it's going to be relatively easy to narrow it down. It's going to be something with Ridley Scott's Alien in it, and whether that's any of the 4 movies, well, any of the 6 movies if you count the Alien vs Predator movies. Okay, any of the 7 movies if you count the shot of the alien skull in Predator 2, and I do count the shot of the alien skull in Predator 2. Also the computer games, the books, the novels, and the Dark Horse comic series. There's just so much material to choose from when it comes to Ridley Scott's Alien. And so, purely for research purposes, I sat down and watched all the movies again, and read all of the Dark Horse comics again. And it was great. I mean, some of the Dark Horse comics were a little hit and miss, but some of them were fantastic. The movies, Ridley Scott's original stands the test of time. It's still fantastic. James Cameron's 1986 sequel, Aliens, amazing. It's still just an awesome movie. Completely different kind of movie to the original Alien, of course. It's more a straight-up action horror flick, whereas the original Alien was a suspense, haunted house, monster picking everybody off one by one kind of film. The other 2 sequels, David Fincher's Alien 3 and Jean-Pierre Jeannot's Alien Resurrection, well, I don't think I'd find too many people arguing that they were better than the first 2 movies. They weren't. But they were still, labours of love. That they were not movies that had just been knocked out quickly in order to cash in on the Alien franchise. They were still made by people who were trying to make the best movies they possibly could. Sigourney Weaver wouldn't have had anything to do with them if they hadn't been. But I'm not going to sit here like some kind of fanboy apologist, trying to tell you and insist that Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection were great movies, because they weren't. They were nowhere near as good as Alien or Aliens, but they weren't as bad as people are making them out to be. David Fincher in particular with Alien 3, I mean, it's almost unfair to call David Fincher the director of Alien 3, because he was brought in quite late during the movie's production in order to try to salvage the train wreck that movie had become, due to producers arguing with studio executives and studio executives arguing with the previous directors who'd all walked out in the middle of production. David Fincher did a competent job with the material that he'd been given, and the movie that he ended up with was certainly not great, but it certainly wasn't terrible. And Alien 3 did at least bring some new ideas to the table. It wasn't just rehashing stuff that had gone before. They were trying to do something new. It was the first movie that brought up the idea that the final form of the alien creature depended on the form of the host from which it had hatched, whereas in the previous 2 movies all the aliens were bipeds because they'd hatched from humans. In Alien 3, the alien had hatched from a dog, so it ran around on all 4s. And the cast of Alien 3 was fantastic. When you assemble a cast that includes people like Sigourney Weaver, Lance Henriksen, Charles S. Dutton, Charles Dance, Ralph Brown, Brian Glover, Pete Postlethwaite, Paul McGann, you're not going to have a bad movie. There is going to be some redeeming features, and the acting was top-notch throughout, particularly Charles S. Dutton as Dylan. I've seen other stuff that Charles S. Dutton has done since Alien 3, and none of it has been as good. He was absolutely fantastic as Dylan, the leader of the inmates of the prison colony in that movie. And then, of course, you move on to the 4th movie in the franchise, Alien Resurrection, directed by the French director Jean-Pierre Jeannot. Genet? I think it's Genet, actually. My apologies to the French for mispronouncing one of your the name of one of your national treasures. I liked Alien Resurrection, even though it had issues. I mean, again, like Alien 3, I'm not trying to pretend it was a great movie. It wasn't. But it had some great moments, and it had some fantastic ideas. The problem with Alien Resurrection was that some of those ideas, particularly the big one, didn't really hold together very well. Some of the ideas, on the other hand, were inspired. The whole idea that it wasn't really Ripley in Alien 4, it was a clone of Ripley, developed from material salvaged from the prison colony in Alien 3. But of course, in Alien 3, Ripley had been host to an alien queen, and somewhere in the cloning process they'd gotten the alien and human DNA mixed up a little, and through repeated attempts to salvage something from the host material, they'd finally come up with the 8th version of the Ripley clone that actually had... I mean, the science behind it was bullshit. Nobody's trying to argue that the science actually made any sense. It wasn't. It was movie bullshit. But the idea that you ended up with a a Ripley character who was 90% Ripley but 10% alien was fascinating, and Sigourney Weaver pulled it off to perfection. She was genuinely scary in parts as this not quite Ripley character. It was really, really good. Unfortunately, the big idea in the movie, the other big idea, the alien newborn at the end, oh dear. It looked terrible. No, sorry. So, yeah, Jean-Pierre Jeunet's Alien Resurrection. Not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but not a bad movie either. It had some great ideas, most of which were executed well. It had some great performances, particularly from Sigourney Weaver, and it had some genuinely scary moments. The part where they're all swimming through the abandoned, submerged mess hall in order to get to wherever the hell it is they were going, and there's aliens in the water with them. Oh, man. I mean, running through the bowels of an abandoned terraforming facility when you've got a gun and you can breathe was scary enough, but the idea of trying to run away or swim away from one of these things when you're underwater, that was a fantastic scene. The rest of the movie, yeah, it had its moments, but not great. Then, of course, you move on to the Alien vs. Predator franchise. And it's at this point where I'm forced to ask the question, how is it possible that you can take predators and aliens and put them in the same movie and have the movie still suck? And the answer to that question is very simple. Just get Paul W.S. Anderson to direct it. Yep, Paul W.S. Anderson, the director who has made a career out of taking other people's ideas and making terrible movies out of them. He did it with Death Race, although Death Race, I mean, it was a B movie, but it wasn't a bad B movie. He did it with Dead or Alive, he did it with Mortal Kombat, and he will not stop doing it with Resident Evil. Now, I realise that the Resident Evil movies do have a lot of fans, and there's nothing wrong with liking the movies. I mean, they're mind-bogglingly stupid, and they make no sense whatsoever, but the games that they're based on didn't make any sense whatsoever either, so I suppose he's at least being faithful to the source material where that's concerned. But while, it's fine, there is absolutely nothing wrong with making a Resident Evil movie that's stupid and doesn't make any sense, because, the plot is not what people watch Resident Evil movies for. But if you take that approach to an Alien movie, you're in a lot of trouble. I'll give you just one example, of which there are many, of the kind of dumb shit that makes no sense that you get in the original Alien vs. Predator. In every other Alien movie prior to this, the length of time it takes between somebody getting a facehugger on their face and an alien bursting out of their chest varies. It's anything between 6 to 8 hours and a day, or at the most 2 days. In a Paul W.S. Anderson Alien movie, on the other hand, the length of time between getting a facehugger strapped onto your face and a chest burster popping out of your chest and then a fully grown alien running around after you takes anything between 2 to 3 minutes. And never mind the fact that there are only half a dozen human hosts available for the aliens to hatch from. If he wants to have 50 aliens chasing you around, he's gonna have 50 aliens chasing you around, and to hell with logic. Oh god, where did it all go so wrong? And it's sloppy crap like this in an Aliens movie that really pisses me off. And it's a shame as well, because Paul W.S. Anderson actually had some fantastic ideas for Alien vs. Predator. He wasn't the first director who'd come to 20th Century Fox with a shopping list saying, please let me make an Alien and Predator movie. And the pitch that he presented to 20th Century Fox it actually had some fantastic ideas in it. The main thrust of his pitch was to explain what had happened to all of these ancient civilizations on Earth that had just been wiped out overnight, and nobody knew why. There were some South American civilizations like the Aztecs and the Incas, although not the Aztecs and the Incas. There were other South American civilizations whose names I can't remember, who have literally just disappeared overnight. Nobody knows why. And his explanation was that the very first human civilizations had been uplifted and engineered by the predators as a breeding colony for aliens. The idea was that the predators, worshipped as gods by early human civilizations, would have these pyramids built, and the pyramids were basically hunting grounds for young, immature, yet to be proven in battle predators. Human sacrifices would be sent inside the pyramids to the egg chambers. They'd get implanted by the aliens. Predators would wait a few hours, then they'd go inside, and they'd attempt to clean out the pyramid of the alien infestation. And if they succeeded, congratulations, my son, you are now a man. If they failed, got overrun, and the infestation was going to run out of control, then they would pop their self-destruct, boom, thermonuclear explosion, civilization wiped out. All made perfect sense, fantastic idea, and of course he did absolutely nothing with it, and he just produced the same sloppy crap he always does. The ironic thing about Paul W.S. Anderson as a director is that when he's not messing around with somebody else's intellectual property, he is actually capable of making a good movie. He directed Event Horizon, which is a fantastic science fiction horror. He's also responsible for the Kurt Russell movie, Soldier. I think most people who've seen Soldier would agree that Kurt Russell's performance is fantastic, and, you know, it's a pretty good B-movie. The only problem is that it cost $75 million to make. It's not supposed to be a B-movie. It only looks like it was made for $5 million. So, you know, let this guy carry on churning out his Resident Evil movies. He's very good at making Resident Evil movies, but keep him the hell away from Alien, please. And then, of course, you've got the second Alien vs. Predator movie, AVP Requiem, and it wasn't a bad movie. It was all right. It ticked all the boxes. The plot actually made sense, which is vitally important if you're making an Alien movie. It was violent in all the places where it needed to be violent. It didn't shy away from showing stuff that you wouldn't expect to see in a movie that had been rated 15 in the UK. Children getting infected by face huggers and showing chest bursters bursting out of children. I never thought I'd see that in a movie that had the rating that it did. And again, it tried new ideas. Although, to be strictly fair, the idea of an alien-predator hybrid, that wasn't the first time, that had been shown. They did that in the comics. But it was the first time they'd shown it in the movie, and they did a pretty good job of it. Special effects were good, creature effects were good, the plot made sense. There was nothing exceptionally good about the movie, but it certainly wasn't a complete waste of time, the way the first Alien vs. Predator had been. So, we've got these 6 movies, all with the alien in them. We can't really count Predator 2 because, there was no aliens running around in that. There was just an alien skull mounted as a trophy on the wall of a Predator ship. So, 6 movies to choose from, and from those movies I have to come up with one scene in particular that, scarred me for life. And when you put it like that, it's got to be the original scene in Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien, when the second officer Kane, played by John Hurt, the facehugger has dropped off his face and died, and everybody thinks he's fine. And then while they're having lunch, just before going back into hypersleep and heading back to Earth, he starts going into convulsions. And I started having nightmares for the rest of my life. There's a lot that's been said about how they filmed that very first chestburster scene, and there's a bit of an urban myth grown up around it. People have been saying that none of the cast knew what was going to happen, that their versions of the script had been doctored, and they had no idea that this thing was going to actually burst right out of John Hurt's chest. That's not actually true. The cast knew what was going to happen, but they weren't prepared for exactly how it was going to happen. What actually happened on the day of filming was that they filmed right up to the part where John Hurt starts going into convulsions and the rest of the crew wrestle him down onto the mess table and try to hold him down. And then Ridley Scott called cut, and he sent all the rest of the cast away for a lunch break. So while Sigourney Weaver and Harry Dean Stanton and Veronica Cartwright and Yaphet Kotto, Tom Skerritt and Ian Holm had gone for lunch, the rest of the crew started climbing into waterproofs, and they started putting clear plastic sheets over everything that wasn't going to be in camera shot. They cut a hole in the mess table, and they brought out this prosthetic pair of legs and lower body. John Hurt popped his head and upper chest through the hole in the table, and they attached the prosthetic, lower body to him. And then they brought buckets and buckets of blood and animal guts in from the butchers. And then they sent out for the rest of the cast, and they brought them into this set, and they just... The first thing they saw was that the crew were all wearing waterproofs. The cameras were all covered in clear plastic sheets, and they just thought, what the hell is going on here? And so they all took their positions, and they turned over the camera. Ridley Scott shouted, "Action!" and it was like an explosion in an abattoir. There was real animal blood and real animal guts everywhere. Most of it ended up in Veronica Cartwright's face. As she reached forward to try to hold John Hurt down, she got most of it right in her face. And when you see that scene in the movie, and you see her flinch and shriek in surprise and terror, she's not acting. That's method acting at its finest. That is my just unquestionable choice for the greatest scene ever in science fiction cinema history. The guy who wrote the script for Alien, Dan O'Bannon, well, he didn't write it alone, he wrote it with a guy called Ron Shusett. It was Dan O'Bannon's idea. Ron Shusett helped him polish the script and make it presentable. He was talking to somebody he knew who ran a cinema, and the cinema manager, while the movie was busy showing, was complaining that it was costing him a fortune to clean up all the vomit in the cinema's bathrooms every time that scene happened on screen. And he said, well, it's a bit of a problem, I sympathise with you. So, it's no problem, we cut that scene out. That is literally how shocking that scene was when it first appeared on the screens in 1979, and it's my instant choice for the single best scene ever in science fiction movie history. Oh, incidentally, while I was rewatching all of the Alien movies, in order to be able to, answer this question, not because I just wanted to watch all the Alien movies again, oh no, but I rediscovered something that really pisses me off about watching movies on Blu-ray, or, DVD if you watch on DVD. Unskippable advertising at the beginning of the discs. What's all that about? If you'd given me the disc for free, then I could put up with it having advertising on it, but I didn't buy your advertising, I bought the movie. Stop it, it's pissing me off. Does anybody else find it both ironic and not at all funny that if you pay for the product, you have to put up with the advertising? If you pirate it, you don't. Makes you think, doesn't it? Any movie executives out there watching? Yeah, I'm just saying. Look at this. 27 minutes into the video and I've only answered one question. Same old jingles. Okay, come on. Let's get on with it. One question that a number of you have asked me over the course of the last week has been, Jingles, how come we're not getting a patch 9.4 test server video from World of Tanks? And the simple answer to that is because, well, there really isn't anything to show you. There's not a massive amount of content in patch 9.4. There are no new vehicles. Well, there are new vehicles, but they're only available for super testers, and there are no super testers on the EU server. There was going to be a new map, Stalingrad. You've probably seen on YouTube some videos of the Stalingrad map. It was originally going to be in patch 9.4, and then they pulled it, and then they talked about putting it back in again, and nobody really knows whether we're actually going to have this Stalingrad map or not. Possibly patch 9.5. The only real things that are in patch 9.4 are some changes to the game mechanics in certain game modes, and there's certainly nothing that I could make an interesting video out of, so that's why I haven't done a World of Tanks patch 9.4 test server video. Actually, while we're on the subject of the future development of World of Tanks, I was reading on For the Record a while back, last week sometime. There were some notes from the developers of World of Tanks at the Igromir game conference, and I must say, right at the start here, none of this is set in stone. These are just speculation and ideas that the developers were kicking around in a public format while they were at Igromir. None of this is going to happen. Some of it might happen, a lot of it probably won't happen, but we're just going to run some of these ideas up the flagpole and see who salutes. They were talking first about a global high explosive ammunition rebalance. Now, that could mean anything, but one of the specifics that they went into was HESH ammunition, high explosive squash head, used by the British tanks in World of Tanks. And they were talking about, rather than that just being another kind of high explosive ammunition, except it has higher penetration than regular high explosive, instead making it a sort of stun shell, where getting hit by HESH knocks your crew out for 3 to 5 seconds. Now, personally, I think that's a cool idea. It adds a bit of variation to the game. But here's the problem. Only the British use HESH. Everybody else would be going, oh, we want this ammunition as well. And they they'd come up with some way of saying, okay, well, the Russians also use hash and the Americans use, and so on and so on and so on. But cool idea. Whether or not they did actually say that they liked this idea, so this may be something. I'd say the chances are probably 60% that we're going to get something like this and 40% that we won't. But the developers did actually like the idea of having an ammunition choice in World of Tanks that wouldn't actually do any damage to the tank, or maybe a small amount of damage, but the major effect would be that it rendered your crew unconscious for a very short period of time, and basically killed your tank for a few seconds. So what do you think of that? Another thing that they sort of confirmed and then sort of didn't, was the whole idea of garage battles. Now, this is a term that's been kicking around in World of Tanks for years. Back when I started playing World of Tanks, they were talking about having garage battles. What the hell are garage battles? Good question. Glad you asked. Garage battles are basically War Thunder arcade battles, where you pick a lineup of tanks, and you don't just go into battle with one tank. You go into battle with, however many tanks are in your lineup, and you keep playing until either you've lost the game or all your tanks are knocked out. Well, they have confirmed that the idea of garage battles in random battles, for example, is scrapped. They're not going to do it. However, they have said that it's going to come in one form or another. And the speculation and the smart money is that it's going to come in the reworked historical battles game mode. That's right, historical battles are coming back, but they're not going to be the same as what we've already seen from historical battles in World of Tanks. They're going to be a strictly PvE game mode, no PvP at all, just you against the computer. Another thing that came out of Igromir was they've confirmed that they're never going to get rid of premium ammunition, or it's always going to be in the game. However, they have speculated that they are considering the idea of removing the alpha damage, or not removing, but lowering the alpha damage of premium ammunition. So, yes, you can buy premium ammunition either for gold or for a lot of credits in World of Tanks that will give you higher penetration, but it won't do as much damage as regular armor-piercing ammunition. But again, this is something that other people have been suggesting for quite some time, and they're considering it. They're not saying they're going to do it. They've said that they are considering this idea. However, it does raise its own questions. There's more than one kind of premium ammunition in the game. You've got, we've already talked about hash, so the idea of turning that into a stun shot rather than a primarily damaging shot, that's one way of rebalancing that kind of premium ammunition. Even whether or not hash is still going to be premium ammunition, they may change it into regular credit bought ammo, just with a different effect. As already discussed, don't know, we'll have to see. Then you've got high explosive anti-tank, which works in a completely different way to APCR. And it makes sense to reduce the alpha damage of APCR because of the way that APCR actually works in real life. APCR ammunition is basically a very, very small and ultra-hard penetrator with exactly the same amount of propellant charge behind it as a regular armor-piercing shell. That's what gives it its velocity and its penetrating power, but it's a solid projectile, there's no explosive filler in it. It penetrates the armor and then it bounces around the inside. It doesn't explode, it doesn't do anything like that. So it would make sense for APCR ammunition to have less damage potential, if you like, than regular ammunition. But that raises its own question, because there are certain tanks in the game that use APCR ammunition as standard. It's not premium ammunition on tier 10 medium tanks, and certain tier 9 medium tanks like the Centurion 7.1, the Leopard prototype, the Type 61, when they're using the tier 10 medium tank gun with the tier 10 medium tank ammunition. And they just make it work. They'd fudge the figures. Historical accuracy has always played second fiddle to game balance in World of Tanks, and that's absolutely fine. It should, because it's an arcade game, it's not a simulator. They basically just change the ammunition choice on the tier 10 mediums in order to not cripple tier 10 medium tanks by not doing as much damage as everybody else. So there's that. The whole idea of having premium ammunition not do as much damage while still having much more penetration as regular ammo. What do you think of that one? So, God, look at the clock. Right at the beginning of the video. Oh, I'm really tired, so this is probably going to be a shorter than average Mingles with Jingles. 34 minutes later, I'm still going. I just can't shut up, that's my problem. Got time for one more question, and then I'm going to knock this one on the head. And this question, it comes from, I can't say his name. It's you Germans and your funny bloody characters and your, oh, what, I'm putting his name up on screen. All right, I don't know how to pronounce this. Look at that. It looks like the letter B, but it isn't. Oh, no, that would be far too simple. Prince von Germany, right? You're not impressing anybody, right? Stop showing off. I'm just going to call him Fritz. Fritz wants to know, and I think I might have answered this question before, but I can't remember, so I'm going to answer it again anyway. He wants to know, if I could only ever play one game for the rest of my life, what game would that be? I'm tempted to say Alien Isolation, because I know I'd never finish it. But that wouldn't be much fun. It would have to be the kind of game that has the ultimate replay factor, the kind of game that's constantly being developed. A game like World of Tanks, for example. You know, every game that you play has the potential to play out differently to every other game that you've played. You can't predict. Well, sometimes you can. And that's the problem with games like World of Tanks and War Thunder. Sometimes it is entirely depressingly possible to predict just exactly how the game's going to play out. But often it isn't. And that's the kind of game. You know, if you could only ever play one game for the rest of your life, that's the kind of game you'd have to choose. And that's probably why these games are so popular. That whole unpredictability of playing a multiplayer game. However, if I had to choose between World of Tanks and War Thunder, I'd probably have to go for War Thunder. Now, before you all unsubscribe and run off to watch Quickie Baby, allow me to explain. World of Tanks is great. But the thing is, with a wargaming product, if I want to play tanks, I have to play World of Tanks. If I want to play aircraft, I have to... Oh, God, please don't make me play World of Warplanes. And, you know, you get the picture. And if I want to play ships, I have to play World of Warships. And World of Warships is looking quite good. I'm having fun in the World of Warships alpha test. I think it's going to be a good game. But they're three different games. With War Thunder, you get all three, or you will get all three, for the price of one. At the moment, it's two for the price of one. So regardless of, you know, how much you might prefer one over the other, I am at least, you know, kind of cheating if I choose War Thunder, because I'm getting more than one game, while still only getting one game. So, for purely practical reasons, and he said, in a vain attempt to stop a flame war over which game was better from erupting in the comments of his latest Mingles with Jingles video, he went ahead and picked War Thunder. And that is pretty much all I have time for this week. It is getting very, very late. I am very, very tired, and I think I'm going to go to bed. However, while I'm still here, and while I remember, I do have one very, very important announcement to make. Many of you will be aware that I have been suffering from the most appallingly bad service from my ISP over almost the last 2 months. What has been happening is that basically the cable in my area is massively oversubscribed. There are far too many people trying to use the same internet cable, and my ISP has promised that by the end of October at the latest it would be fixed. They're laying fresh cable, they're improving the contention rate for all the users in my area. Well, 2 days before I went to Comic-Con, I was getting just over 1 megabit of download, which is a quarter of the amount of service that you can have in the UK, and for it still to legally be described as broadband, and it's less than 1% of the download speeds I've been paying for. I have what's supposed to be 120 megabit connection, and I was furious. It had been getting worse, not better. However, what I think had been happening was that the engineers had been digging up the cable in the local area, and they left the bare minimum of service in place while they laid fresh cable, because the very next day I was back up to 120 megabits worth of download speed again. And I tested it all through the day, and it stayed, and came back from Gamescom, and I'm still getting 120 megabits, and it looks like I've finally got my service back, and I'm going to be able to start playing War Thunder and World of Tanks again. And hopefully, if I haven't been replaced completely, join Quickie Baby and Circumflexes for their live streams. So, normal service, hopefully, has now been resumed, which is, you know, fantastic news. So there's that. Yay, I'm back. And not before time. I was getting sick and tired of watching everybody else's replays and not being able to play my own. So that's pretty much it. That's what I've been up to this week. I've been to Comic-Con. I've been watching all of the Alien movies. Unfortunately, Alien vs Predator 1 amongst them. And I've got my service back. So everything is good in Jingle Land once more. Take care out there, folks. Have fun playing whatever the hell you're playing. And as always, I will catch you next time. Take care.